Beautiful. So welcome to our opening book, the book or the opening chapters of our new Sefer Shmuel Aleph, Samuel 1, which really is a continuation from the end of Shoftim, which we read about the incident last week of really the repopulation of the tribe of Binyamin. And if you remember, it was also the region was Mehar Ephraim, from the mountainous region of Ephraim, although Benjaminites lived there. So we're going really to that part of Israel in the continuation, and hence that was somewhat of a segue. You may recognize this chapter because this is a haftarah. Actually, the first two chapters, I believe, are the haftarah from a particular day. I'm going to leave it to you to find out. If he doesn't recall, or if you don't recall where it is by the end of tonight's lesson, I'll let you know when we read this haftarah. But see if you can come up with it. Think of a similar theme, what we're going to be reading about, and that is really what the it's a little bit tricky because it's not the day theme; it's actually the background theme. I know I'm maybe confusing a little bit, but the theme is covered in a particular day. I'll give you a hint. It's a holiday, so it's not a particular Shabbat. But again, the theme of what we're going to cover is also covered on that holiday specifically. It's a little bit tricky, but we'll see who can figure it or who can come up with it. So let's continue. Shmuel Aleph. Vahi ish echad. There was one gentleman. There was a man. Min haramatim tzofim mehar Ephraim. He was from Ramatayim Tzofim, from the mountainous or the hilly country in the region of Ephraim. His name was Ushmo Elkanah. His name was Elkanah. He was a son of Yeroham ben Elihu ben Tohu ben Tzuf Ephrati, from the town of, he was an Ephraimite. Okay, so that's and we have, I guess if you want to go, we have his lineage. Velo shtei nashim. This gentleman had not one, but he had two wives. Shem achat Chana, one of his wives was Chana, v'shem hashenit Penina, the other wife was Penina. Vahi lifnina yeladim, Penina had children, will Chana ein yeladim. However, Chana had no children. Okay, so there's a gentleman, has two wives, one bore children, one does not have children. And of course, this is a very similar theme that we have a lot in the Torah about women being women, the stress caused particularly to the women, especially when there's more than one wife, where one of them does not have any offsprings, because basically, she'll be cut off. She brings no value, so to speak, to her husband. This was how it was seen. This gentleman would go from his town every year. He would go up to Shiloh. This is where the central or the capital of Judaism was. It was before it was centralized in Yerushalayim. It was in Shiloh, but he would go up once a year to Shiloh to offer sacrifices to the Lord. V'sham, and there, Shnei bnei Eli, Chofni u'Finchas, Kohanim l'Adonai. There, there were two children for the son of Eli. Eli was the Kohen Gadol. He had two children whose names were Chofni and Pinchas, who were also there. So in other words, they were introduced now to three Kohanim, the Kohen Gadol Eli and his two children, Chofni and Pinchas. Vahi hayom, and one such day when Elkanah goes up, Vaizbach Elkanah, and he went up to sacrifice. Venatan lifnina ishto, ulchol baneha uvnotea manot. And from the sacrifice, some sacrifices, you don't burn the entire animal, but you actually eat from. So he gave portions to Pnina and to all her children. Ulchana iten mana achat apayim. But for Chana, you only need to give one portion. Why? Because she didn't have to share with anybody. So he gave one. How come? But why? Ki et Chana ahev v'Adonai sagarachma. He favored Hannah. He still gave her a portion, but he favored his wife Hannah. However, God had closed her womb. Vechiasata tsarata gamkas. Moreover, ba'avur har ima kisagar Adonai bad rachma. It was difficult to translate the whole thing, and it's hard to explain whether she felt angry and she felt the pain and anger ba'avur har ima for Pnina, her rival, so to speak, because these two wives are rivaling, obviously, for their husband's attention, for their husband's sleeping rights and propagating in terms of making more children. And so obviously Pnina would entice Elkanah to come over, because Hannah, it's just a waste of time to be with Hannah since she can't bear children. And this created a rivalry and made Hannah miserable, angry, and very painful, that she was taunted that she could not have children.
Yossi, how do you translate apayim in the
Achat apayim. Erech apayim is a face. He gave her. It's kind of like a personal thing. Achat apayim, to her. He gave one portion to her.
Okay.
El erech apayim, a long face. It's apayim is a face or a countenance. It's a figure almost of speech.
Why is it dropped from the English translation?
I think the way that Sefaria does it here. Let me see what here. He said here it says, but to Hannah he would give one most attractive portion. So apayim he's translating here as a very succulent and nice, big, perhaps even disproportionate to what she should be receiving. And that actually makes sense because, and it says ki et Hannah have. In other words, he gave her a very beautiful portion, for he loved her. However, she had no children. Erech apayim. That's where we have that as well, one of the 13 attributes of God. Okay? I'll try to get you a better translation, but I think it also is text sensitive. So when you use it, it may have a little bit of a different connotation. Okay? Does that help, Chaim?
Yes.
Good. Excellent. All right. So she's right now bitter and angry from the fact that there is this rivalry between her and Pnina, and Pnina obviously lets her know, or at least she feels that this is a central part of their exchange.
Yossi, why is there the letter B?
Pardon?
The letter B, before only and after though.
If it's in the program, when you hit it, it takes you to different. Here. I'll show you. If I hit this B, there is it because I'm not
commentary.
It's like a quotation you have to go to a source and it gives you another explanation for it.
Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of like ibids and stuff, and takes you to another explanation of what it is. It's commentary. Okay. V'chen, see here we have C. You see in C and C minus. V'chen yaseh shana v'shana midei alta beit Adonai. And this happened year after year. Every time that she would come up to the house of the Lord, ken tach isena vatifke velo tochal. So the other would taunt her. Pnina would get her angry and taunt her. Vatifken, she would cry velo tochal, and she was not able to eat from that which Elkanah gave her in terms of the portion from the sacrifice. Okay, so she was distraught. Obviously, there was a lot of stress between these two wives. Vayomer la Elkanah isha. Elkanah, her husband, told her, Hannah, lametifki. Hannah, why are you crying? V'lame lo tochli. Why aren't you eating? V'lama yira levavech. Why is your heart so rotten? Why is it in such a bad place? Halo anochi tov lach me'asra banim. Am I not more devout to you? Am I not as good to you or better than even 10 sons. In other words, I love you so much, I treat you so well, am I not better than 10 sons? Now he's trying to console her. Vatakom Chana achrei ochla b'Shilo v'achrei shato. And after they had eaten and drunk at Shiloh, Chana rose. Ve'eli haKohen yoshev al hakiseh al mezuzat heichal Adonai. And Eli, the Kohen Gadol, was sitting on the seat near the doorpost of the temple of the Lord. Vehi marat nafesh, and Chana is really not in a good place. She's in a very, very marat nefesh is in a sick. She's not feeling well. She's in a very bitter place. Vatit palel al Adonai uvachot tivkeh, and so she prayed to God, and she wailed and she wept, all while doing so. Vatidor neder vatomar, and at the same time she made a vow, and the vow was Adonai Tzvaot, O Lord of hosts, Imra'ot tireh be'onia matecha, if you see the suffering of your maidservant, uzchartani ve'lo tishkach et amatecha, and if you remember me, do not forget, or you don't ignore your maidservant, venatata lamatecha zera anashim, please grant your maidservant a male child. Untativ ladonai kol yimei chayav, and I will dedicate him to the Lord all the days of his life. Umora lo yale al rosho, and no razor shall ever touch his head. In other words, he shall not cut his hair. Any idea of what this is? What is she doing here?
The pledge of a Nazarite.
Right. This is a Nazir. A Nazir. Although there's no mention technically of wine products, but yeah, this is a Nazareth a vow. In other words, she's already pledging, if she gives birth to a son, if God gives her a son, the son would become a Nazir. Does this sound like another story which we read actually in Shoftim?
Shimshon.
Shimshon is a very similar story. And if you look at this, the two ladies here who are Pnina and Chana is very similar to Leah and Rachel. Right? They're two. It also is very similar to Sarah and Hagar. Right? Hagar has a child, Sarah does not. Hagar is taunting her to the point where Sarah tells Abraham to kick her out. But with Leah, it's and Rachel, it's literally the verbiage that are used here. The same words are literally conveyed in the story of Rachel and Leah. And so she's praying. While she's praying, she's crying. She makes this vow. Vayaki her beta, as she kept on praying, leitpalel lifnei Adonai, she continued and engrossed, and it became bigger and bigger. In other words, her energy, her concentration became larger and larger as she continued. Ve'eli shomer et piha, and Eli watched her mouth. Eli was watching what she was doing, and particularly was focusing on her mouth. V'chana, and Chana, he medaberet al liba. Chana was not verbalizing what she was saying. She was talking from within her heart. In other words, she was not expressing it out loud. Rak sfatei naot, however, her lips were moving, were mouthing the words. V'kola lo nishma, but her voice was not heard. V'achshavea li shikora, and so therefore Eli thought that she was drunk. So she is uttering words. What is this? By the way, what does it look like? What is he describing? Which prayer that we say? Which prayer during What prayer? It's very similar to Shemona Esrei, right? Although Shemona Esrei, we actually have to say it in an undertone, but that's what it sounds like. If you ever see people davening, they're going, and you don't really hear what they're saying, but they're reading out the words, they're mouthing out the words, but they're really very little or inaudible sounds are coming. So she's she's saying something. She's talking with no voice coming out. He thinks that she's a drunk. What does this teach you, by the way, about prayer during those days?
It played an important role.
Yes, but obviously it was not prayer the way that we know what prayer is.
Well, there wasn't the Siddur yet with definitive words. It was much more from the heart, so to speak.
Right, but it used to be, I think, more where there was either an interaction with you and the Kohanim through sacrifices, and this was obviously something that was not done regularly, or this wouldn't have been an anomaly. He would have seen others, thousands.
Well, the carbon. Well, Yossi, the whole korban in every respect was effectively tefillah.
Right. Now, well, we can flip it. Tefillah right now basically represents the korbanot.
Right. Yeah.
So in other words, the prayers that we have now are a
Are the
substitute.
successors to the korban? Yeah.
Exactly. So basically, that function of prayer or talking to God didn't really exist, or at least not in the same way that we do now, where we ask God for health, for sustenance, for weather, for abundance, for knowledge, for protection. All that stuff really was not as common as is now, that we have a text. It was not textualized yet. So here she is. She's going rogue. She's praying from her heart. She's verbalizing without she's enunciating without voice coming out, and she seems like she's a drunk. And
I think that the custom was always to pray first and then to eat. And here she already ate, and so
that could very well be as well. In the old prayers were really texts from the Tanakh, so in other words, from the Torah. So in other words, whenever you did something, then you used to say Harami Oved Avi, and it's very clear text from what you would say when you did certain things. So and when you said it, you said it out loud when you gave a certain korban. I'm not saying that there was none prayer, but it was not done in this way. And perhaps you're absolutely right, Henry, that also the order of that, she did it after she ate and after they drank. So naturally, he's looking at it and he's saying, "Oh, she must have drunk just a little bit too much, and maybe she's, she's under the influence, so to speak, and now she's inspired, so to speak." But obviously, was still what he's describing is something that similarly looks like what davening is today, but obviously it was not really commonplace then. So it's interesting, but also, like, you're right. I like Henry. Thank you for that insight in terms of that taking place after the feast itself. So finally, as he thinks that she's drunk, Vayomer Alea Eli turns and speaks to her, and he says, Ad matai tishtakrarin? Until when? How long will you make Hasiri et yenech malach? You have to stop this spectacle of you being drunk. You have to be very careful at how much your intake, and sober up and be a little bit more responsible. Vatan Chana vatomer lo adoni. Chana replied and says, "Oh, no, that is not the case, my lord. Keshat ruach anochi. I'm a very weak-spirited woman, and not weak as in like as in a personality, but she was very weak in terms of her outlook. She was very unhappy. She was not a positive. Everything was negative to her. She did not have a good spirit about her. V'yain v'shachar lo shatiti. I do not drink. I have not drunk nothing, not wine nor any strong drink. The only thing I was doing was I was pouring out my heart in front of the Lord. Do not mistake and take your maidservant for a worthless woman. Here it's also Belial. If you know that there was also deity that also required drinking and then becoming promiscuous and through getting drunk, etc. So you can look at it both, either worthless woman or I don't believe in all these other things that I'm trying to get, have to be high on something in order to get my feelings out. For I've only been speaking all this time from the great distress and the anguish which I feel. And I've spoken out, I've been pouring out my anguish and the distress which I have felt. Ve'an Eli, and so Eli responds to her, and he's apologetic. Vayomer lechila shalom, he's apologetic. I'm sorry. He says, please, no, sorry, go in peace. Velohei Israel, however, the God of Israel, yiten et shelatech asher shaltimo, and I pray that the God of Israel grant you whatever you had asked of him. She responds, Vatomer, timtza shivchatcha chen beinecha. I pray that I do find favor in your eyes. In other words, that which you spoke, I hope that those words come to be. And so the woman left, and she ate from that which was given to her by Elkanah. Ufaneha lo hayu laod, and her face, the look that she had before, the downcast face, the unhappiness look, no longer was upon her face. So in other words, there was a transformation here where she has, obviously there's hope. She suddenly feels that there's hope to have a child. They're still there. They're still in Shiloh. In the morning, they wake up and they bow, and in other words, they go to pray. They do whatever the ritual of bowing before the Lord. Vayashuvu vayavo el bitam haramata, and they return back to their home. Vayeda Elkanah et Chana ishto, and Elkanah and Chana have relations, and Vaiskereah Adonai, and God remembers her. Okay, so after they return, she sleeps with Elkanah. They have relations, and God remembers her. Vahilit kofat yamim, and it was during the not the incubation. What do you call it? What's a technical? Not the just no. The duration of pregnancy. What do they call it?
Gestation, is that what you're thinking?
Yes. Oh yeah. So it was during that time. In other words, 9 months passed. Or during that 9 months, Vatahar Chana Vateled, and Chana became pregnant, and she gave birth to Vateled Ben. She gave birth, and she bore a son. Vatikra et Shemo Shemuel, and she called her son Shmuel. Why? Ki me'Adonai she'ilti, for I have asked him. I've asked God to give me this child. So Shmuel comes from Me'Adonai she'iltiv. It's actually interesting. If you actually look at it, his name, it's kind of backwards. She'me'el. Do you see? That's where she's saying she'ilti is the shin, me'el, right? Shmuel. It's almost though, however, it sounds like God listened, right? So it's a positive name of she's not giving him that I've asked for him, but that God had heard me and responded. Shama, almost Shama, even though Ayin Shama is with an Aleph, but Shmuel almost looks like as well. His name is God, who obviously Shmuel's not God, but that he was given to her by God. Vayal ha'ish Elkanah v'chol bito, and so once again, the cycle continues again, and it came to be again. Vayal ha'ish Elkanah v'chol bito lizboach l'Adonai et zevach hayamin ve'et nidro. And so it happened again after a little while. After that, what does they do? They once again, Elkanah goes up to Shiloh to bring offerings to the Lord, the annual sacrifices and his votive sacrifice. Chana, however, lo alata, Chana did not go up with him. Ki amra leisha, for she told her husband, Adi gamel hanar v'haviotiv. When the child is weaned, when he is bigger, then I will bring him. V'nir'a et b'nei Adonai v'yashav sham adolam. For when he has appeared before the Lord, he must remain there for good. Why? Why must he remain there?
Well, the whole concept was this was effectively her trade-off. She wanted to have the child, and she was going to give him to God in exchange for having the child.
Exactly. That was part of the Nezirut. That was part of that promise that she said, right? That she will make him. And if we want to look back again, right? Where's here it is. Venatativ ladonai kol yimei chayav, and I will dedicate him to the Lord, which literally meant that you would give him over to the Kohen. Okay? So she's telling him, I'm sorry, we cannot right now go up there, because the moment that he goes up there,
that's it.
That's it. He has to remain there. And so I want him to get a little bit older. And once he's able to remain there, he understands, obviously, then, because this is where he's going to be remaining. Vayomer la Elkanah isha asi hatov benaich. And Elkanah, her husband, says, do that which you believe is the correct thing. What is it? That which is correct or just in your eyes, that which is you feel is the right thing to do. Shavi ad gomlechoto. Stay at home until you have weaned him. Achakem Adonai et devaro. May the Lord fulfill his word. Vateshev Aisha vatenek et bena ad gomlato. And so Hannah remains at home. She nurses her son until she has weaned him. In other words, and that usually ad gomlato is when the child no longer needs he can sustain not through, obviously, through cooking or through going to buy the food, but he's no longer at the mercy of his parents to make sure that he can stay alive. So in other words, he can be nourished through an outside source. In other words, he's no longer reliant on the mother. And what happens? True to her words, when she had weaned him, she took him up with her. Befarim shlosha, veifa achat kemach venevel yain. And she brought all these things. She brought three bowls. One ephah. Ephah is a measurement. Ephah of flour. Venevel yain, in a jar or a jug of wine. Vatviehu beit Adonai Shiloh. And she took him and she brought him to the house of the Lord in the city of Shiloh. V'hana'ar na'ar. And now the boy is still young, but he's a boy now. He's no longer just a little toddler. Vaishchatu et hapar, and they sacrificed the bull. Vaiviu et hana'ar el Eli, and they brought the boy, the child, to Eli. So obviously, it seems to me very clear that there was some kind of ceremony. This isn't. I mean, although it's a rarity, we don't. Not everybody would sacrifice their children to or dedicate their children to the Lord. But there was a ceremony of sorts when you did that, and this is what they're following. And so they brought the child over to Eli. Vatomer, and she says, Bi Adoni, my Lord, please, chei nafshecha Adoni, as you live, my Lord. Ani haisha hanitzevet imcha bazeh leitpalel. Do you remember? I was that woman who stood beside you there a little while back, who prayed to the Lord. El hanar hazeh palalti. I prayed to receive a child like this. This is what I prayed for. She's pointing to her son. Vaiten Adonai li et shelati, and God gave me that which I asked for. So she's saying, do you remember me? I prayed. This is your prayer to me, or your blessing to me came forth, and now I am that woman. But v'gam anochi hish'ilatihu ladonai, I in turn hereby lend him for God kol hamim asher haya, for all his days. I right now am lending him to God. Hu sha'ul ladonai, for he is lent or Shaul. God is asking for his return. In other words, God kept his end of the bargain. Now, in response, God is asking for me to bring him to fulfill my end of the obligation. Vayishtachu sham l'Adonai, and there they bowed before the Lord. Interesting. There's the stylistic of writing is very different than that which we had in the book of Shoftim. I find it incredible that the words Kishaul, later on, who do we have Shmuel with? Who's the king that Shmuel is?
Oh.
Shaul.
Obviously, Shaul.
Oh,
Shaul. So it's a very funny play on words. She's foreshadowing as well in terms of some kind of relationship that Shmuel and Shaul who, you know, that we're going to have another character kind of coming up in the future who Shmuel, her son, is going to be very intertwined with. Who is that? It's going to be Shaul.
Shaul, and of course, in the end, he's going to tell Shmuel is going to tell Shaul that his reign is over and he's
Right.
not going to be the progenitor of future generations. That's it.
That is correct. Michael, I believe you shared it in the chat for those who have not seen it.
I did that intentionally.
Yeah. So where is this haftarah from?
It's the first day of Rosh Hashanah.
Right. So first, that's why it was hard for me. It was not usually haftarot are paired off. We think of Shabbatot, so you would think of. I gave you kind of a clue in terms of the relationship of Hannah and Penina, these two women. I mentioned one is Rachel and Leah, the other one is Sarah and Hagar. And why is this? Anybody want to venture out why this is read on Rosh Hashanah? What's the connection of having children or the child of Rosh Hashanah?
Well, you're saying the story of Yitzhak and Ishmael becomes
Right,
a parallel.
So if you remember, what do we read? What's a text, the Torah text that we read on Rosh Hashanah? We read about the Akedah.
Yeah.
About Isaac's binding, right? Vashem pakadet Sarah kasher amar. It literally begins, and God judged he came up with a decision, just as he promised Sarah that in the following year she would have a child. If you remember the three angels that come over and tell her you're going to have a child, that's right after that. That's what we read on Rosh Hashanah. So God, one of God's decrees, Pakad, which what we do, right? Judgment Day is Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. That whole atmosphere of what happens during that period of time during the year, again, alludes to a little bit of Rosh Hashanah. This is when God made up his mind, so to speak, made his verdict of giving her, making her pregnant. And the whole story goes that she prayed. Her whole life she saw herself as not being able to provide the most important thing for Abraham. Abraham had riches, had following, had respect, but he did not have a child. The one thing that he wanted was to make sure that for the future, and she could not. That's the only thing that she wanted to give her husband, and finally she does. But she also has this relationship with her handmaid, which she gave to Abraham. So again, and Hagar also pestered her about her inability to give birth. So it's it mimics a very similar story. So the theme is there, and there is a tradition, by the way, that says that both Sarah and Hannah were answered on Rosh Hashanah. So why? What? And where does this? I mean, you can say it's really far-fetched, but that is really why. What happens with Elkanah? He comes once a year, right? It doesn't say he comes 3 times a year. It wasn't yet. Beit HaMikdash was not yet built. He's not coming on Rosh. He's not coming. So it's clearly he's not coming on Pesach during the 3 pilgrimage. He's not coming Shavuot, and he's not coming Sukkot, right? On Yom Kippur, what happens on Yom Kippur? We don't eat. So how can they be eating? How can they be feasting from that which they are sacrificing? So what day is it?
Rosh Hashanah.
Rosh Hashanah.
By default.
By default. So hence that deduction, that logic, and as well, you see it with Sarah, as I mentioned, Vashem pakad et Sarah. The reading begins with, and God judged, and what happens on that? That is really what happens, or the judging period begins on Rosh Hashanah. So you have that kind of that likeness. It's a deduction from the text and from the nuances of what happens in the text. But that's a connection. The only difference is on Rosh Hashanah, the text actually continues on. There's also chapter 2 is also read, and chapter 2 is a beautiful prayer, and we'll read it next week. Any questions? So I think the beautiful thing, by the way, in terms of the text difference, is that suddenly there is, from a very grim, if you remember the ending of Shoftim was, this is how lowly society was in Israel at that time, that everybody did whatever they felt was right in their own mind. It was, and it ends off, of course, with the horrible stories of the rape and the murder of the lady, but then later on also ends up with them stealing girls for Benjamin. It was all upside down and not in order. And here finally we see the text is there is hope. There is a child right now that is born, and now we're going to see where and how this child, what he brings to society in terms of order from the chaos that was rampant at that time, which is beautiful. And also, by the way, the text is also in much more calm and poetic format. The words that are used are absolutely beautiful. Anybody last comment? Anybody? So let me